Fascia is the tissue that can connect a lot of our muscle groups together. It can really be bound and create bad movement patterns. So throughout this, you're trying to drive against all that restriction, lengthening. So we're going to start seated, breathing. We're expanding the chest, but we're also expanding the back of the rib cage. We're trying to push our shoulder blades down and out of the way. We're trying to open up that rib space in between the spine and the shoulder blade. We're not pinching the shoulder blades back with the inhale. We're actually expanding. We're not caving the chest in either. It's equal expansion. It's like a seesaw. The chest is coming up. The shoulders yourself are coming down, but the rib cage is keeping that expansion. The shoulders are pulling out, but not the blades. It's that glenohumeral joint that's rotating externally inside the socket. If the shoulder blade pulls in, it's not going anywhere. Even though your shoulder blades are pinching back, you haven't made the change where it needs to happen. And this can hit all that fascia in the front of your neck. It comes down into your chest. We're also expanding the back of the rib cage, so we're going to hit all those areas of tightness that are running up our mid-backs into our shoulders. Next, you're going to go into a kneeling position. You're going to squeeze those inner thighs together. Make sure you have your feet wider than your knees. It's going to help the internal rotation of the hips. And we're going to drive. We're pushing from our knees, 90% of your weight in your knees, driving up through the hips driving up into the spine, back of the skull driving up towards the sky. The shoulders are doing the opposite. They're pulling down and out. Again, we're not pinching the shoulder blades. You can see that subtle internal external rotation of the hands. It's good to do. Time it with your breathing. That's happening just at the shoulder. It should be really restricted. When you really time all this well and get very conscious about it, you can feel all that tight fascia that you're working through with just subtle motion. Just another view here, so you can see that chest expanding, the big SCMs pulling, the back of the skull lifting. We're getting that stretch. This is what we call long wing, short wing. So the short wing is pulling up, getting a big stretch in the pecs, then long, you're pulling the shoulders down. Again, you can time that with your breathing. You don't have to do either of those. You can just pull the arms down with each of these breaths, trying to get longer and taller. The belly drawing in, the belly button drawing into the lumbar spine, lengthening, tailbone pulling away from the skull. Next, we're going to do the founder. We're going to do it narrow, but you can be wide, as is shown in the picture. The point is, we still want to challenge those adductors to squeeze the inner thighs. So it's easier to sometimes feel that same position we just had kneeling. Your inner thighs are squeezing, rotating in, and you're expanding with the sphere of tension, and then you're exhaling with the platter. Platter is the flat hands, and that's when your elbows are reaching away from your hips. The hips are pulling back, your hips are hinging away as your elbows are reaching, extending. And then you're just switching between the breath. The inhale, sphere of tension, expanding the ribcage, thinking wide. The shoulder blades are pulling wide. You're going to feel all that tension, that tight fascia in the ribs. And then you're lengthening too. So two things are happening at once. The kind of 360-degree expansion. And that's really going to help drive against that fascia that's compressing you and creating bad movement patterns. Just another view from the back here. And you can really feel almost like that lat tightness. Lat is like a big muscle, but there's so much fascia that goes with it. Lat pulling in from your pelvis, into your sacrum even, into those lumbars, and it drives up, runs along the rib cage, and goes underneath your shoulder. So as you're reaching with your shoulders, and your hips are pulling the opposite, you're able to get that lat muscle, but it's so much more than just the lat muscle. It's all that fascia, and you can kind of see that pulling even through the shirt, that tight lat where we're all just restricted there. Again, the skull's lifting, the back of the neck is lifting. We're setting everything up very correctly to do this. And one thing we missed in the last stage that we always want to remember to add here is your first measuring stick lengthen, gauge, pull the belly in. Then you're going to notice the hands go to the hips to remind the inner thighs to squeeze. Then here, the sphere of tension is pushing away from your mid-back. That T7 vertebrae, and then the sphere of tension driving away before you hinge. That's going to help lengthen the neck last. A lot of us want to get the neck right first. First, it's the hips, lengthen, then you're driving into that position. So we want a little spiral when we do this. So hinging, adding a spiral, pulling up. And you're going to feel that tension all along one side. Because we all have fascia that can be kind of rotating us, turning us towards one hip. Then we're walking crooked all day long, and it just feeds upon that imbalance, and it starts affecting the joints and the muscles. That fascia just gets so comfortable and tight being there. So we can attack one side over the other. You might even notice one side is more restricted. You feel more of that binding that you're pushing against on one side. Do an extra set on that side. Let's run through those steps again very carefully. Pushing up on the back foot, you're loading the torso on top of the hip, the front hip. About 90% of that weight there. Engage, lengthen, inner thighs squeeze like you're a pair of scissors. Hands come up, height of the heart, sphere of tension. Hands pushing away from the mid-back, and that's going to engage the neck. Do all that before you hinge over that front hip. That's the only thing really moving is that hip. Once you're there, you can raise your hands just a little bit, and then rotate over your left. So you're gauging everything, really hitting that left hip. The external rotator is that left hip, but also the right side of your body. You're going to feel that psoas stretching. You're holding that over top for 10, 15 breaths. Make sure you're reading the descriptions just to get some more verbiage on what you're doing here. So there's a lot happening, even more than what I'm saying, and I know I'm saying a lot. So keep working through these things. Review the other videos. But this is just something really short. You can do every morning. It's taking you 6 minutes. It's no big deal. You could definitely handle this.